Some people believe that the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah in the Old Testament were destroyed because of a lack of hospitality. However, St. John Bosco, and actually the entire Catholic Church for the last 2,000 years, have agreed that these cities were engulfed in a rain of fire because of sins of impurity, and even worse, a very specific type of impure sin. In today's episode, I'll recount a sermon in which St. John Bosco shows the gravity of sins against the sixth commandment. The date of the sermon is unclear, but it was probably during a retreat in November of 1843. I've never heard this Old Testament story explained so well and made so applicable to everyday circumstances, nor have I ever heard this great saint speak with so much passion and insistence. I truly believe it's one of his best works. Go get it! The Miracles and Prophecies of St. John Bosco, a project of America Needs Fatima. I'm your host, Matthew Miller. Subscribe for new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Don Bosco began his sermon by quoting the Gospel of Matthew, "You shall not commit adultery." He said, the old law had already forbidden every action which might lead one to the dreadful vice of impurity. But when the Son of God came into this world to definitively fulfill the whole law, he not only confirmed what was written, but added that anyone even looking with a lustful eye or a corrupt heart upon another was already guilty of that same offense. "You have heard," he cried, "that it was said to our ancestors, 'Thou shalt not commit adultery.' But I say to you, everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart." After profound reflection upon the severity of this law and the ugliness of what it forbade, the Apostle Paul did not even want Christians to mention it. But oh, for bygone days! Oh, wretched habits of our own day! There is hardly any conversation in which this sin does not find its place. There is no banquet in which impurity does not take the first place. There is no urban district, square, meadow, field, no flower of purity that has not been soiled by some such filth. Libertines speak out in their own defense. Is it so serious an evil, then, to season one's amusements with a witty or loose remark? Is it so serious an evil to yield to our nature's weakness? Oh God, is this not a serious evil? Is sin only an indifferent action? What unheard of impudence and boldness! Since such people don't accept your statements and have excuses for everything, I shall give them the most convincing reasons why impurity is a serious evil, so as to eliminate every excuse. Truly, this argument will not affect the people to whom I am now speaking, while on the contrary, those who most need to hear it are following other paths than those leading to sermons. But even if this sermon shall not reprove or disturb you, it will at least serve as a safeguard and protection. Now, it cannot be denied that anything which seriously moves God to anger and to punish severely in the past must be a serious evil. Even though God created a place of eternal suffering for everyone who stubbornly breaks His holy law, He still releases thunderbolts of vengeance upon the impure in this life. I will describe to you the tragic scene in which this sin was first punished. It was in the 17th century of the world's existence. All parts of the globe then known were already dwelt in by the human race. There were good people, and we must admit that there were bad people too. When the good began to have contact with the evil, they looked each other over, and after looks they exchanged words, and after words they passed on to behavior, to invitations, and then to a series of sins and sensuous excesses. The sacred text assures us that everywhere and anywhere horrible offenses were committed. What offenses? Well, I shudder to tell you. Sins of the flesh. All mortals led depraved lives from Genesis. God was silent while every other sort of wickedness was committed, but when He saw the vile brute we speak of growing stronger, it was as if he had been mortally wounded by a piercing sword, and full of grief and bitterness, he cried out, "I am sorry that I made them." St. Jerome says, "We do not read of any other sin that God said, 'I am sorry that I made the human race,' except of sins of the flesh." Hence, neither Adam's disobedience, nor Cain's murder of his brother, nor the many infidelities of the Israelites, and not even the killing of God, committed in a manner most unspeakable and shameful against the person of our Savior, incurred the wrath of God more than the sins of the flesh. Now tell me, can anything which causes such bitterness in God be a minor evil? Something which causes him such immense anguish to the extent that he's sorry he created the human race? It would surely have been enough had God done away with the sinners. I will wipe out the men, and not only the men, but also the beasts. Even the very animals perished, either because they had been used as instruments of sin, or because they had merely witnessed the misdeeds of the human race. All of them were exterminated. The creeping things and the birds of the air. All of them, of course, except those that were on the ark. Rain pours down, the floodgates of heaven burst open, and immense water wheels send storms of water upon the earth. The shattered earth lets the streams hidden within her breast flow freely, so that seas and rivers, floods and rain all unite to cover the face of the earth. What of the human race? What of the indecent? Where are now the impure, the lustful, those who deemed impurity a minor evil? They all pay the price of their filth and infamy. It takes ceaseless rain for 40 days and 40 nights to wash away such iniquity, so that the stench of their sins might be noticed no longer. The waters rise to immeasurable heights over their bodies until they stand 15 cubits above the very highest mountains. The whole world was thus drowned for more than 150 days. The flood came to an end. The earth was inhabited again. And behold, the dreadful vice which had been wiped out became active again. Did it perhaps go unpunished? Not at all. God swore that he would not again drown the world in a universal flood, almost as if he thought it unbelievable that the human race could commit such iniquities after so terrible a punishment. Their punishment would no longer be universal, but would be even more fearful than the first time. So the all-seeing Lord turns his attention to the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and their neighbors. He sees all of them ravaged by the lusts of the flesh. Moved to wrath and considering the rain of water an insufficient punishment, he sends a rain of fire upon them. A rain of fire? Precisely. And what a miserable sight. Now let the indecent learn how great an evil is impurity. The sacred text tells us that the sun was rising in the sky when its rays were covered by a dark veil, while fearful darkness spread through the whole atmosphere. Then the terrible darkness was dispelled by a terrible light, amid which a new kind of rain streamed furiously down, a rain of fire. Balls of flame and crackling, blazing sulfur streak like lightning, falling as if hurled down upon all those sinful cities and the whole surrounding countryside. In the cities, the squares, the streets, the houses are all already on fire. The fields are already burning, blazing, and being devoured. And what has become of the lustful inhabitants of these cities? These vile people who no longer find any satisfaction except in orgies, in immorality, in shamelessness, are now all surrounded, flooded, and assailed by the fearful conflagration. Still more, the cities and their citizens, with all their possessions, sank beneath the ground. The earth opened up and swallowed everything into its bowels to form the immense sea which we call the Dead Sea. Many reliable writers tell us that this sea is useless for navigation and is entirely unproductive. Moreover, those fish that are carried into it by some current are choked and die in its diseased water. Birds that try to fly across its expanse are halted by its filthy stench and fall lifeless into its water. As the Epistle of St. Jude says, likewise, Sodom, Gomorrah, and the surrounding towns serve as an example by undergoing a punishment of eternal fire. Shall this evil count for nothing? Shall that sin be rated as a featherweight? Or is it not rather a pestilential filth for which so terrible a punishment was sent upon the earth to exterminate and wipe out those who committed it? I know what indecent people say. Yes, these punishments did happen, it's true, But there is no reason to be afraid, since God never sent them again, and certainly will not send them again in our time. If that's how you talk, what can I tell you? If God stays the hand of punishment over you, if He doesn't want to visit such fearful punishment upon you at once as He did to others, you're right. Continue going your own way, doing whatever you please. But you should at least notice that if God is so good, so generous, and long-suffering with you, you shouldn't behave so ungratefully toward Him. It might well come about that if too much outraged, His patience may give way to wrath. Those for whom He waited longer, He condemns more severely, says St. Gregory the Great. Such an indifferent attitude already testifies to the influence of sensuality, which makes the lustful incapable of recognizing their own unhappiness. Their reasoning is blinded and no longer perceives. They tumble from their elevated, dignified level and become like unclean animals. In the Psalms, God says through His prophet, "Man for all his splendor, if he hath not prudence, resembles the beasts that perish." I will not speak of the droughts, floods, hailstorms, or famines, but what can I say about those unfortunate people who are caught when the evil time falls suddenly upon them? Struck by the lightning of divine vengeance in the very moment that they are consummating their evil deeds. What could I ever say of all the many, many youths we find in homes and hostels? Oh God, how many of them there are! They lie in bed, covered by repulsive ulcers, or eaten up by pneumonia or tuberculosis, drained of strength, and so oppressed by illness that one is moved to tears. If we ask the cause of all their troubles, they are forced to confess to their shame that their sicknesses are the sorrows of the wicked. Their riotous and indecent way of life was the cause of their misfortune. Allow me to give rein to my zeal, you cowards and wretches. Recognize for once your dignity and what it is that makes you unhappy. Stop looking for doctors and medicines for your evils. Instead, abandon sin, which is their cause, and do not, I implore you, do not ever say again that immodest clothing, indecent conversation, scandalous behavior, hanging out with gangs, drunkenness, and parties are all minor evils. Avow sooner that they are serious evils, enormous sins, sins which God has always punished by the most severe calamities, sins which shame and degrade the human race, making us like beasts and rendering us completely wretched and unhappy. Therefore, you must flee such sins as enemies that overwhelm the human race with every kind of disaster and misfortune. Thank you for watching, and if you'd like to hear more of his thoughts on purity, just click on the playlist above me here. God bless you, and Our Lady keep you. Go get it. Go. What? You're not going to jump off?